Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 10 Weather Chat. This week we are talking about saying goodbye to meteorological fall and hello to meteorological winter.
That transition, yes, and we've already seen some bouts with cold weather, so in some ways it seemed like just like that.
Yeah.
We're transitioning from fall to winter.
And rain, also.
And rain, how about that? Yeah, just like that.
Yeah.
We've gotten some rain events, Cassie.
I think we talked about that in one of our other 10 Weather Chats about the drought. We were like, oh man, but you know how it goes in Tennessee. We go from here to here, and we certainly have both with temperatures and with precipitation.
Exactly. At least maybe the spigot's halfway on now.
Somebody bumped it with their elbow and we're getting to trickle again.
Exactly. It seemed like it was all the way off for much of the fall, which we're going to get to in a moment. But yeah, thank you for joining us. We love these chats. It's a good informal time to just sit down and discuss what's topical or relevant, what's going on in weather.
Yeah, I think the first thing we need to establish is the difference between meteorological seasons and astronomical seasons.
There's a difference?
There's what? The meteorologist asked?
I'm going to play along here. Right.
So meteorological seasons are determined by averages, and we go by monthly calendars. So by the average, the three coldest months of the year are December, January, February.
Right.
By the averages, the warmest are June, July, and August.
Right.
So that's summer, and then naturally fall and spring fall in between.
Yeah, you transition months in between. Officially, winter officially begins on the winter solstice, around the shortest time of the year, coming up December 21st, and that's astronomical winter when that begins.
That has to do with the Earth's tilt and its rotation around the sun. So when we're talking about fall, we are talking about meteorological fall, running from September 1st through November 30th, and for that time frame, we had the second driest fall on record.
Second driest fall, that's impressive. I mean, all right, so let's talk about this.
Look at some of those
Look,
years.
they're right behind me, Cass, here. Wow, I mean, 2.5 inches for the whole fall in 1894, and we were just behind that in 2023, 2.9. Before we got that one rainfall
on November 21st.
Yeah. We were setting up
by
far the driest fall.
Yes.
We were on track for the driest fall on record for much of the month, actually.
Yeah. And the thing I want to take note of with the years is that the most recent year that we've had a top 10 driest fall was actually in 1987. That's the fifth driest right there. Everything before that is way back in the 30s, the 20s, and even in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So very, very long ago since we've had a dry fall like this.
Right.
And 87 is one of our analog years for our El Nino conversation that we had for what we could be looking at for what that could lead to coming up this winter ahead.
Very interesting. Analog year. You look back at past years, right, and you can get a good idea for maybe what is coming or what could be seen by looking back at the past weather events, past weather seasons. And so 1987, 1988, a moderate El Nino, I believe it was, and you look at that winter, and we'll have to see if there's some similarities being in a strong El Nino this year. But that's one of the analogs that shows up, so maybe we'll talk a little bit about that.
Well, I was going to say, I know people watching this right now are like, well, what was it? And what it was a warm and somewhat dry December.
Right.
But a very cold January and February.
Right.
And I think it was the 12th snowiest January on record as well. And that's something we've discussed with El Nino as well, is that the effects of an El Nino aren't really felt as dramatically until you get into late winter or even early spring. So what we're seeing now is not necessarily how things are going to go for the whole winter season.
That's a great point. There's a lag.
Yes, there's a big lag.
The impact's a big lag. And so that 87 and then that January 88, January 88, if you look back at some of the weather records for the eastern U.S., some records were set.
Yes.
With snowfall. Now, we're not saying we're getting a ton
We're not
of
saying
snow.
it's going to happen this year.
Can't say that. It's just one factor. One of the tools, the analogs we can look at and say, okay, well, there's some similarities. We'll see.
Yeah, and they, of course, had a dry fall. And just to give you a reference, 2.90 inches is more than 7.5 inches less than we normally would have. And so that ranks us second here. So going into the winter season, of course, that brings us in with a deficit both for the month, for the year, and for the season as well, which is how we got here.
Yeah.
This is the latest drought monitor as of last Thursday. So this is not counting the rain that we saw on Saturday, which was on December 2nd, which was our record daily rainfall, more than 2 inches of rain. When that new drought monitor comes out on Thursday morning this week, I think we're going to see a big improvement from this.
We're speculating, obviously. We'll have to wait and see. But maybe a lot of the red, at least, Could be gone. I mean, we'll have to see. I mean, hopefully a lot of everything you see from the moderate, severe, and this is extreme, hopefully everything just gets pushed back down the valley. It was coming up the valley when it was getting worse. Hopefully it's going back down, and we're improving, certainly.
So during the fall season, just to give everybody a recap, we had tied for the 5th driest September, tied for the 11th driest October, and then because of that rain on November 21st, the 31st driest November, so that ended up taking November from a top 10 driest and dropping it down a little closer to the average.
Right. Real quick, in 2016, we were talking about the similarities. We were obviously concerned, as you were and all of us were, about the dryness.
And the fires.
And the wildfires. Obviously, you had to be because there were some similarities there. In 2016, like the end of the month, we got over 4.5 inches, right 24 hours after the wildfires. But anyway, it's kind of interesting when you look at stats. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture. You can't just look at the final number. You have to look at it in context of what happened beforehand. So,
which is how we got to the drought.
Yeah, how we got to the
drought. So dry
drought
during the first half of November, and then we caught up toward the end.
Exactly.
So it was the second driest fall. We only had 28% of our normal rain. It was the 21st warmest fall season that we've had, which means that going into winter, which started on December 1st, we had a yearly deficit of almost 5.5 inches because we did have the 10th wettest summer.
Right.
Contrasting with the second driest fall.
That's when the spigot was.
Spigot shut off. And so that brings us into winter with a deficit from fall of 7.61 and for the year of 5.48.
So we're going in, so we were warmer and drier.
Yes, for fall.
So that's our segue as we get into.
So here we are into winter. Remember we said it's by months and seasonal averages. So December, January, February is meteorological winter. By the averages, the coolest temperatures of the year. Highs average about 48 degrees through most of the month of January. So if you haven't already pulled out your kind of like flannels and sweaters.
Yeah, that's why we're dressing warm.
You better pull them out because we're going to keep seeing those temperatures trending downward.
Yeah, there you go. That's our averages. We bottom out, the middle part of January in general.
In general. And something else to take note, I know that fall is typically our driest season of the year. You can see that here when we look at our average rainfall per month. August, September, October, or September, October, November tend to be drier, but to specify, Todd was talking about breaking down the months. In the month of November, that 4.21 average rainfall is weighted toward the back half of the month.
Yes.
More of that happens in the back half than does in the front half.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That's essentially what we started to see this year and back in it eventually broke and we started to see as Cass said, getting into the wetter months. So December, the second wettest month on average, July being the first. So yes, at least thankfully we are moving into our wet season.
Yeah, so from December, January, and February, if you add those 3 months together, meteorological winter by the averages is our wettest season of the year in the Knoxville area. So we do expect to see our precipitation starting to pick up. It's important to remember that also the averages are going up. So you may still see a deficit even though you're starting to get rain. However, we moved into the month of December and just right off the bat had that heavy rain event on the 2nd.
Yeah.
We've had more than half of our average monthly rainfall in the first 2 days of the month.
In the first 2 days?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. And a quick point, Cass, we see more consistent rainfall in the wet season, December, January, February. You see July is our wettest month. That's some thunderstorms.
Yeah, daily afternoon storms.
Your downpours and exactly. So the wet season is where you're going to collect more of the beneficial rainfall. TVA, by the way.
I was just about to say that,
Same page. They're very thankful, that's right, to see it's starting to rain so the basins, the reservoirs can start to recover and restore some of that water. They do a great job managing it.
They do. We actually got to go talk to them last week, and they were kind of like, for a drought, they prepare for it. And they handle it, and I mean, they've been storing water a little more than they normally would this time of year in case the drought continued. Now that we're starting to see the rain, they'll likely create more room for that flood storage. That's why the lake levels get dropped during the winter season, is because by the averages, that's our wettest period, winter and spring.
Great point. Yep.
They need to have flood storage space because also during the winter season, not only do we have more rain, but because the ground tends to be colder and more dense, and because there's no vegetation to absorb the moisture, there's more runoff. So you get more rain, but you also get more of that rain running off, so flooding potential rises winter and spring. And so that's why your lake levels lower those months. Versus in the summer, they bring them up because less of a flood risk and also for recreational purposes.
That's it. Folks working on their docks and their lakes and getting all that done. So
getting all ready.
The mitigation they do a great job handling that, certainly.
So during the winter season, to kind of recap for you, our average winter precip is over 14.5 inches. We've already got 2.71 inches of that in the bucket. Good news right there. Good job to
Good start.
off. Good start to December right there. Now, we also need to talk about the wintry side of things, because when you have more precipitation and you have more cold air in place,
right,
you get a better chance of wintry weather.
Right.
And our average winter snowfall is 3.6 inches for Knoxville. That is 78% of our average seasonal snowfall.
Okay.
So most of our snow comes in December, January, and February based on those averages.
There you go.
Can it be outside of that? Yes.
You think the folks are interested in snow in the winter?
Nah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think they care about snow.
I think a lot of folks are, you may have gotten to just fast forward through this stream. When are they going to talk about snow? So I know everybody is certainly interested in that. So yeah, so there you go. Well, that's what the wet season, you more frequent chances. And we can, talking about El Nino, there is that lag, but as you get more of an active southern branch in the jet stream, you have more frequent systems, some wet systems. But when you get the polar branch occasionally coming down, if the two meet up, that's when you can see some of your significant snows. And that we'll probably be talking about that in future weather chats, like the ideal scenario for winter storms, et cetera.
Yeah, that's you can go back and watch our El Nino conversation that we had kind of about what to expect big picture for this winter. But the main thing to remember is just because it's not happening now doesn't mean that it won't.
Right.
In January and in February, because that's when the effects of El Nino tend to kick in a little bit more. Some of those analog years show our better snow chances being in January and February.
And folks, and sometimes March.
And sometimes March.
And sometimes April. No, sometimes March, as we know. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how that plays out the second half of this winter.
Yep. So make sure you tune back in for updates. Of course, we'll be giving you more updates on the shorter term side of things as we go along as well. And that's going to do it for today's 10 Weather Chat.